Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, everybody.
How are you doing, my friend? It is good to see your face.
We are back. So last two episodes we did were a pre-recorded sessions that were out on the last week's two episodes. This week we're jumping right in. We're back live again. Tommy's back from his conference. And before we get into the news, Tommy's probably got some fun stories to tell us about the Data Dynamics Summit Conference recap. Let's jump into what our main topic today is. Our main topic will be talking about how do you leverage data modeling in an event-driven type architecture. When events are part of your ecosystem, how do you do the data modeling? And again, we're thinking my initial concept here is semantic models, but there may be something different. We should maybe expand our definition of what data modeling looks like when we're talking about event-driven architectures. So we'll jump into that here in just a moment. That being said, all right, Tommy, how was the conference?
Oh, yeah. So it was honestly a great conference. So I went to the Dynamics Summit conference in Orlando, Florida. And Mike, we used to go to these all the time. World Tour Dynamics Communities used to be a pretty large organization that was basically helping put on user groups. And they did a ton of Power BI World Tours, like 7 every year. And then the big Dynamics Summit. We didn't go. I think you and I went to the last one together when it was in Houston because it was all just Dynamics, business objects, Business Central, not a lot of Power Platform, Power BI. I actually talked to the guy who I believe took over the company, and they are doing a lot around Fabric and data. So it was a great conference. 6,000 people at the Gaylord Palms.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's too hot for me. 80 to 75, 80 is too hot for me. So
your blood has thickened up since you've been living up here in the north, Tommy.
My wife, I always ask my wife, how did we live in Florida? She's like, you barely did because you complained every day we were married. So maybe I think. But I did 2 sessions. I did one on data agents in the semantic model, and I did one on promoting and adopting Power BI in your organization. Funny enough, I mentioned this on the podcast before. My initial session when I set to speak was on metric sets. For data agents, they wanted me to do the metric sets one.
Sure.
Well, we know in the beginning of October, Power BI and Microsoft said, metric sets, it's not a thing.
No more.
So we had to change the website for the conference. However, at the in person, my room where it says what's the next session, and on the planner app, it was still saying metric sets. So obviously, naturally, no one really wanted to show up. And then they would walk in. I'm going, I'm not gaslighting you. We're actually talking about data agents. And the reason why is metric sets is not worth your time. So
it's not going to be around much longer. And basically it's out now. Like it should be done.
Yeah, it's you cannot create a metric set, I believe, as if you tried today on Tuesday, the 28th, you can't.
They're gone.
So, and they'll be gone from your tenant in the middle of November. Anyways, my data agent session, which I was able to do on Wednesday, where it was all promoted and all that. Dude, Mike, I have to give it to data agents. I thought it was a dumbed down version of AI, but with custom instructions and a semantic model, it was one of, and I don't gloat or blow my own smoke, but it was one of the best demos in terms of working and impact for people that I've done.
Really? That good? Well, this is what I was talking about. I think we've talked about this before, Tommy, which is like, hey, we need to look at like what features come out from Microsoft. And when the feature wows you, right? If it really does something that you're like, wow, without a lot of effort, you get a first, you only get like a couple tries at a feature before people are like, is this useful? Is it not useful? If you don't get that right, people walk away from it and they won't revisit the feature for months, right? They just won't touch it. So you have this like very short window of like, can you make this work really well? And if you can't, then you're probably going to be losing a bunch of people and they're not going to revisit it. And this might have been like the story of metric sets here a little bit. People tried it and were like, interesting, but I don't really find a use case for it. And they just never came back. Nothing was ever added to it. Never gotten additional investment to make it more polished.
And that was, and again, the initial one, I forgot what it was called. It wasn't data agents. It was like, but when the first iteration of being able to create like the AI and connect to your own data.
Yep.
But what it's done now, what they've really invested in is the data source implementation integration. Great, but the custom instructions is integral here, Mike.
Yeah. That's what you you needed the extra prompting, the context, the business context.
Yeah. So I
agree with that.
No prompt, a basic prompt, and then a full advanced prompt. And we saw how the agent literally behaved differently and got the answers right. And semantic models, I didn't have to, like basic things of the prompt was only use explicit measures that are already in the data set.
Yep.
Don't rely on kind of thing. And then one of the things was if someone asks you for this particular measure, but they don't ask for a group or field, please ask them to clarify one. So don't give an answer all the time, because that's usually what happens with AI is you give a broad question, and rather than the AI saying, can you clarify that? Actually having that conversation, it just does basically a search.
Sure.
And that worked incredibly well. But no, man, I have to say I'm impressed with data agents, and I'm on the discipleship right now of telling people there's Copilot in standalone.
Yep.
There's Copilot in a report, and there's Copilot Studio, which is on Power BI, and there's data agents, and none of these are the same.
No, they are different experiences. Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad you're finding some value from that one. So that brings us basically to our first announcement here, since we're talking like the news items here. Oh, yeah. I think your first one here, Tommy, is talking about introducing improvements to the Copilot in Power BI. Did you have any notes there around that one?
So this is, I think, like I told the attendees, is right out of your book. They asked, like, should we invest our time in this? It's like, if you want to know where Microsoft is investing their products, look at the blog.
Yep.
Look at what updates are happening. That's where their money is. That's where their priorities are. And we're seeing a lot with Copilot now, where really you can even edit existing reports. It can now select the most appropriate visuals and go through better instructions. So this is pretty cool. So we'll actually look for visual recommendations in your based on your data automatically. It's live now in the service. It's coming to desktop. It's not in desktop yet, but this is, we're seeing some pretty significant updates there. It can add visuals, change and replace visuals. So this is all about building reports.
Mm-hmm. This makes more sense to me. And this is kind of like the agents for reporting, I guess it would be where we kind of maybe classify this one. Agent that allows it to do things or edit things on your report page. I think this is going to be extremely effective, and this is, I think, the direction it should go. It should go more this direction. This is a lot of, it's going to make decisions or best practices or trying to make things that are useful here. There's still always going to be this, gap between like, hey, I just need a quick report, getting some charts on a page, and then there's a polished report, right? So I don't see Copilot right now being able to make a fully polished report. It's going to give you like a good starting point to begin, but you're going to need to continue to there's going to have to still be individuals, or there will be still individuals who are going to make these highly polished app experiences as well. So I don't think those are going to fit the Copilot experience yet, but definitely nice to see that they're going that direction. All right, what other news or articles that you have out here for us, Tommy?
Oh, Mike, right down your alley. Introducing the Power BI controller, which your first thought, very broad. Streamlining storytelling with bulk operations. Mike, when you read that title, even if you read the article, what do you think that is going to be?
The title doesn't make sense. I don't even understand what it's talking about. You really have to go in and understand the naming of this is very weird. You really have to read the article to understand what is it trying to accomplish here. So
yeah.
So go ahead, Tommy.
This is all about PowerPoint. What
I know.
kind of thing? Power
Favorite.
BI controller sounds so cool, like if something in the service that you could do, but
Yes.
it's like like an AI agent or I don't know. But anyways, it's a PowerPoint addition or enhancement to the original plugin, which simply allows you to serve as it's a pane. It's a pane. It's a PowerPoint pane for all your existing slides. So basically, the idea here is a lot of users have complained that they have to go through and replace images every month because they're doing the same Power BI embedded reports. And every month they create a new presentation with the latest data, yada, yada, yada. So what the controller comes in, so you can switch all the add-ins from the current image to the live one and revert all the add-ins and give the finalized presentation, making sure the data is up to date. So it simply is bulk operations, multiple embedded reports, and yeah, it's a pain.
So whenever I hear Power BI inside PowerPoint, there's a couple key requests or features that I'm seeing that people need to have inside the PowerPoint slide deck. One of the things that I see a lot of times, or at least I've heard a lot of times, I don't use PowerPoint. My opinion is don't use PowerPoint for Power BI. It's not the right tool for it. Push people to the actual website and you'll get the information there. So that's kind of my initial opinion. But I realize slide decks need to be maintained. People need to continue to push in information. So this controller is really the way of letting you have more control about what is being presented in the report. Do I iframe the report? The Power BI report, is it interactive inside the PowerPoint presentation, or do I want a bunch of static images? So there is a feature here it's called switch to snapshot, where you're able to present a snapshot mode of the report. And I think this is going to be highly effective because a lot of times people will say, I'm going to build the slide deck, but I need the images of the report to be in the slide deck, but they're going to put it away somewhere on a SharePoint drive. They're going to print it out, and they don't want the data changing from when they present it. There needs to be a static look or a static lens of the data at that time when that presentation was made. And this I understand, right? This is the whole point around PowerPoint presentations, right? This is my executive slide deck, and we're going to go through this every quarter or every month, and we're going to review where we're at business-wise. You don't want those slides changing over time. And so Power BI doesn't necessarily have this without a lot of additional effort and design in your semantic models. Doesn't really have a way for you getting snapshots in time of data and saying this is the status of this report as of this date. But I think this is a really good solution for people who want snapshots of data. And it feels like this controller is giving users these kinds of additional capabilities, right? Specific features only for PowerPoint when you're using the Power BI plugin, basically, or the add-in directly for PowerPoint. I think this makes sense.
So it makes sense. It's a good name. It could have been saved in something else. And honestly, though, too, if you are using the Power BI plugin, you're probably not using that on a one-off basis. You know what I mean? That add-in is definitely something that you're not going to do one-off. You're the only person that knows it. Odds are that your company is saying, hey, if you're going to show Power BI, use the plugin. So that's probably why there's a lot of dependencies there.
I guess I'm going to argue if you're already using PowerPoint today and taking screenshots of Power BI reports and putting them into PowerPoint, this is definitely the tool for you to go take a look at. I think it will simplify a lot of what you're doing and potentially give you a lot more control around what you want it to do, what you want Power BI to do inside the PowerPoint presentation. So if you use PowerPoint a lot for this kind of stuff, then I highly recommend this tool to go with your workflow. I think it'll fit very well. So I do like this one. For those who actually need it. I do not need it.
100%. All right. We got a few more. We'll kind of run through it. Fabric updates. Well, simplifying data ingestion with copy job. Copy data across tenants with the Fabric Data Factory. So you can cross-tenant data movement, Fabric to Fabric, Fabric to Azure, Azure to Fabric, which is pretty cool. You can use service principal authentication and multiple types of delivery styles. You can bulk copy, incremental copy, even CDC replication. So pretty cool, Mike. And I think for a lot of organizations, there is a lot of multi-tenant usage where it's not just also all in Fabric. There's a lot of organizations I'm talking to today where, especially government too, a lot of the government licensing is not available with all things in Fabric yet. So they got to use Azure, but they want to do Fabric. So this makes things a lot easier. So just making it easier and easier. You got to love it. What's your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting feature here, just because what they're doing here a little bit differently. When you look through the instructions on this particular article, and I'll make sure I get this one over here. Let me copy the link here and make sure I put this inside the chat window here. This is the link's in the chat now. It's also in the description down below. One of the main features here is they're using a service principal, an app registration that is being leveraged to connect to the data. So this is essentially allowing you to create an app registration, but during the copy job process, you're able to go to that app registration and get access to that data on behalf of a different organization or a different Microsoft tenant. There's becoming more and more of these use cases, or at least the request I'm hearing on my side is tenant to tenant sharing of data is becoming more and more of a real pattern and use case here. So how do we do that? So this is a really interesting feature in that regard. I think it's more technical in the nature of like the setup. You have to like build something in Azure. There's a service principal. You're not using the workspace. This is in this example here, they're going from blob storage through to a lakehouse in some other tenant. So good use case. I think this is useful. I think people are going to ask for this. It needs to happen. And as I look at this feature here, I think, okay, it's just kind of like table stakes for me a little bit. Like this is something that I would expect needs to exist as part of the base feature set for those who are more into the data engineering, more in the advanced side of things. So anyways, I like this feature. I think it's good. I'm still going to rib a little bit here on copy job a little bit. I mean, I still experience copy job looks like it's still a bit more expensive than it does when I run like a pipeline, or data flows Gen 2 seems to have some cost implications as well. So I think that the pricing is getting more competitive against the different products or the different compute engines, but still right now I'm looking at this going, my fan and favorite right now is still Spark. Spark still seems to be like the most efficient use of my compute unit so far. So I like this feature. I think it's useful. I'm not sure how many customers or listeners that we're listening to right now are actually going to need cross-tenant sharing. It kind of seems like a little bit of a niche point, but again, you should be able to support it. Like this is like a table stakes thing in my opinion. It should just work.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let me ask you a question, Tommy, real quick about this one. So with this idea of a app service principal or app registration, are you in your workflows, Tommy, are you exploring the workspace managed identity? Have you been building anything with that recently?
You know what? I actually just started dabbling with that. I talk about being thrown off when Fabric API first came out. It was tough, man. But what they're doing now, I'm like seeing a lot of automation opportunities. But Mike, what have you been doing that's kind of blown your mind?
Not really blowing my mind per se. It's just more of it feels like a new best practice is starting to evolve, right? If you are connecting to a SQL server, if you're connecting to some other object inside the lakehouse, if you're connecting between semantic models and lakehouses, you can now start providing the identity of when you create the connection between different items, you can start using the workspace identity as opposed to an individual user's identity. And not all connections are covered yet. So it's not fully, I guess would say, rolled out to everything, which is kind of annoying because you would expect the workspace identity could be used with any kind of connection type across anywhere inside Fabric. Doesn't feel like that's the case. I'm trying to remember what we were trying to connect to. It wasn't being covered, and it was weird that it didn't exist. But it only gave me the OAuth 2.0 identity to sign in to connect to the data source. So it doesn't feel like everything is yet be able to be used to connect to things yet. But I really do like this idea of, Tommy, your identity is no longer attached to all the connections. I think that's a much better way to handle things in the future here. So,
dude, I I love it. I love it. But Mike, I know we got one more, and I don't know how exciting this is, but let's just go through it.
Well, for you, Tommy, I think this is a really exciting one.
SQL Server Management Studio 2020 or 22 meets Fabric Data Warehouse. Microsoft has put a strategic investment in for SQL developers in Fabric and SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS, the tool used by millions of database professionals. You can now have workspace names can show friendly names instead of that cryptic, like I'm not sure if I'm connecting. Connecting to something hackable code or whatever, what it is from. Schema-based object grouping tables, views, and stored procedures are organized based on schema, especially if you're using the one in Lakehouse. You can do warehouse snapshots, context-aware menus for cleaner menus, and some of the things that are coming is context menu actions, extract the data pack, refresh the snapshot, Fabric script generations, and warehouse lifecycle, all in SSMS for Windows. Kind of cool.
I think this is a straight pull for any of the SQL developers who have been building things in SQL in other places inside Microsoft. This is a straight pull to go into SQL Server Management Studio right for Fabric. I mean, this makes sense. If you're going to put SQL Server and data warehousing inside Fabric, you've got to have the tools support it 100%. I think this is a table stakes for me. I think this is useful. I think the SQL community needs this so they feel comfortable in Fabric and have the existing SSMS experiences that they're used to using, but directly inside Fabric. So I think this makes sense.
No, 100%. So just wanted to shout that out there because honestly, Mike, a lot of people I'm talking to, there are a lot of people at the conference. Oh, some people at the conference, they love us. They make their kids listen to it that are in high school on their way to work. So a few people came, asked about the podcast, but I mean, at least at Dynamics, man, a lot of database side, like heavy usage.
Yes.
There were even some baseball teams or representatives from the Major League Baseball teams at this conference because they use Dynamics.
Interesting, Tommy.
Yeah. So I did not get a job with the Yankees, which I was very upset about.
Well, they weren't there because they run their own. They're on AWS. I guarantee it.
Are they on AWS?
I guarantee they're on the coast. No. So most I would say most observationally, like when you look at the coasts, the East Coast and the West Coast, for whatever reason, they're earlier to adopt technology stacks or whatever that means. So like it feels like the coasts are much more AWS. The Midwest, where Tommy and I are, is much more Azure based. We feel like I feel there's a lot more Azure experience and or companies using the Azure in the Midwest area. So just, I don't know, just maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe it's just where it started getting adopted. So my guess would be is Yankees are using AWS as their data store.
They were there. Apparently the Yankees guy was there.
What?
So, yeah. So I was like, I need a job. I need a job with the Yankees.
I'll work for you for free.
Yeah, exactly. Just get me season tickets kind of thing. But database, man. And so a lot of people ask about what capabilities with the normal tool. So I think these are updates that I like to see that are, I feel, on direction on where we're going. So this makes me very happy.
Well, Tommy, maybe next year you and I should really take a serious look at the community summit for Fabric and Power BI and do some talks around that at the community summit from our side of things. Just because me personally, as I'm growing my business, I'm getting to the point where I think I really do need to start using some sort of substantial system to put all the information in. And one of the things I'm looking at is Dynamics. I think Dynamics is going to be useful. I'm a Microsoft shop already. So I'm already looking at, okay, what products can I pull out from that system? How can I start leveraging that to store data that I care about and build little mini automations? I was just talking with Armando on a different podcast about all these automations we do. Anyways.
Dude, it runs the world. Just so you know, Dynamics runs the world.
It's a big system. It's a big system. All right, let's jump into our actual topic today. So the topic today is going to be around data modeling and event-driven architectures. I'd like to bring in our guest again. So welcome, Chris. We appreciate you being back again on the podcast. Sorry for a long intro today. It's been, Tommy had a lot to catch up on. So we're jumping in today and welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It was a newsworthy week, so no problem at all.
It was. All right, jumping in for our main topic, data modeling in the event-driven architecture. Let's talk about this. Let's unpack this a little bit. Chris has also generously supplied us with a Learn link here for guidance around event-driven architectures in general. So I'll pull that up as well here, and I'll put this in the chat window. This is kind of be some of our talking points for today about like what does this look like and how we unpack. Let's just maybe define an event-driven architecture, maybe for our audience. Maybe Chris, start us there and give us kind of your definition of what an event-driven architecture looks like, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so if you remember back from our last couple of episodes, we've been talking a lot about real-time intelligence and Fabric and really acting on data in motion and acting on things as they're occurring. Right? In its simplest form, you can think of an event-driven architecture as really allowing you to unlock this. If you're familiar with Lambda architectures and how Lambda has worked, think of it like the hot path of a Lambda architecture, right? I've got my two paths in Lambda. I've got hot, where my data is coming in consistently and it's always being generated. And it's something that I need to do something with, like in the moment. It's only powerful in that, 5, 15, 20 minutes after it's generated, and then it just becomes aggregated and sent on its merry way. Mm-hmm. So event-driven architectures allow us to take advantage of that data in the moment when those things occur. I came up with a new analogy a couple of months ago, and I think it's really fitting. So a great way to think about it is if you think about it like you're driving a car, and if you're listening to it while you're driving a car right now, right? So imagine if you didn't know how fast you were going until you got to wherever you were going, and then you got a report that said, hey, while you were driving, this is how fast you were going. Right?
That would be weird.
That would be weird, right? And in many ways, we can think of data in much the same way, right? But it's very reactive. We get a lot of these different pieces. And so event-driven architectures really allow us to, in its simplest form, take these things that are occurring in the moment and knowing about what those pieces are. Your car on that dashboard we were just talking about, telling you how fast you're going, is an event-driven architecture. Like there's something that's reading from the engine. It's saying, here's how fast we're currently going. And then it's going to go show it on a digital display so you can go see it. So that's not useful for telling you what happened 5 minutes ago. It's useful to know, like in this second, as I'm driving down the road, what my current speed is, my RPMs and anything else, my engine oil temperature, all these other pieces. So being able to kind of get to these pieces allows us to act on our data much quicker, like we've talked about, right? So real-time intelligence really allows us to kind of go there. But when we move to that, we need to start thinking a little bit differently about the way that we've been modeling data historically, right? So when we think about I'm going to jump ahead a little bit maybe, but
sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Pre-question, but when we think about a lot of the ways in which we've modeled and built data for as long as I've been in the industry, it was, do we build third normal form, and do we go with Inman? Do we go with Kimball and we create star schemas? Do we create data vaults, right? And so I can count on more than one hand the number of conferences where we would have these long, drawn-out conversations around, well, I'm going to build a data warehouse. Should I build my data warehouse on Inman? Should I build my data warehouse with Kimball? Should I build a data vault? What are all the different tools and techniques that are available to me? Sure. But when we think about those things, they're very reactive by their very nature, right? We have to take time, we have to assess, we have to understand all the data that's flowing and where everything's coming from. And what we know about creating those pieces is they're useful, kind of like a bag of Legos, right? Of here's all the Legos that I have, and I'm going to go piece them all together. When people start adding Legos to the set, and you're like, well, what do I do with this piece, right? Now I have a 2x4 or a 1x8. Like, how am I going to fit this into my structure? So you have to kind of take this assessment and come back and say, okay, how am I going to go remodel my data a lot differently? With event-driven architectures, one of the real key pieces here is that the importance, and where you really want to put the pressure, or kind of the key pillar, right, is we want to be able to act on this data. And so being able to contextualize and being able to create these references and being able to pull these things are really important to be able to say, hey, I want to go pull this on this event as it's occurring. However, I do want to still do that modeling, but maybe I want to do that modeling a little bit later, right? So it's like it's almost like a deferral, right? Of hey, my primary focus on an event-driven architecture is I want to consume the data and I want to keep that data in motion. I might want to contextualize, I might want to enrich it, I might want to do some of these other pieces with it. But when it comes to creating my star schema for my reports or all these other pieces, maybe that's something that you either generate on the fly with what's called a materialized view in Event House, or it's something that you just say, hey, I'm really going to focus on using the data in its current form because I really don't have time to go through that large, expensive modeling exercise. And I'm going to defer that downstream. Right? And I think that's a really fundamental piece of event-driven architectures, because when we think of processing data in a data lake or in a data warehouse or data lakehouse or MART or whichever inventory supply location you want to choose for your data needs, when it comes to modeling that data, we have to move through all those different phases. So we have to create these stages. We have to curate the data. We have to go do all these different refinements. Event-driven architectures are really about consuming that data in the moment. So we create the contextualization of the data as we need to, and maybe we're sourcing that from a data warehouse, or we're sourcing that from a data lakehouse or set inventory system of choice, and we're it into our event as that event's being generated. And so that allows us to really take a lot of those actions on top of it.
So there's two, in my mind, there's two lines of thinking around, like when we think about event-driven architectures. I think the default mode, and we've talked about this before, which is we go right to like, oh, it's an IoT device. It's a manufacturing line. It's something that's like always streaming data directly to the events. It's a series of events always happening, and you're trying to like find anomalies and look for things that are out of scope. So that, I think that's what my mind naturally goes to. But I think there's another realm of this that is under talked about or not communicated as well, which is hey, I have a file that shows up in the lakehouse. We can be notified when that file appears and then take actions on doing something with that file. It's an asynchronous action, but we do something in a slower pace. It's not as fast. It's not like I'm streaming data from an IoT device. It's more about things are happening inside a data system, and we're able to listen to particular events. I kind of liken this, I think we've talked about this before, which is your Ring doorbell or your video camera that's a doorbell, right? A lot of things, there's video all the time, 24/7 getting streamed through your camera. I don't really care about most of the time of what's happening, but I care when that Amazon driver shows up and drops the package, right? I want to go get the package and bring it in the house. So that is like a specific event that I'm interested in. And when that occurs, that's when I want to take action. And so I look at this going, there's kind of two worlds to this. And what is your reaction to that, Chris? Is that your impression too? Do most people fall into the IoT realm when we say event-driven? And do you think we need to emphasize a bit more of the event-driven, like the asynchronous messaging that we can do things with?
I completely agree. I call it the Ferrari effect, right?
Okay.
And to your point, when we think of event-driven and we think of events that are being generated, we typically think of manufacturing or your car driving or whatever, right? There's tons of use cases for that, right? And I call those Ferraris, right? Those are all things where, by their very nature, they're generating data every second, sometimes even at the sub-second level. And so we want to be able to pull this and kind of see these things as those are happening. Those introduce their own different set of challenges with event-driven architectures, because we start to introduce things. And one of the things I joke about quite frequently is when you're building a system in real-time intelligence or in another system around some type of event-driven architecture that is handling that, you're processing that data so fast that as a data team, you're actually introducing a problem that you've never had before, which is you creating and absorbing what's called jitter from those things as they're being generated. So false readings, right? Or something that's happening, right? Whatever it could be. And it could be lots of different things. But essentially, you find yourself in a situation where you physically have to hold the data for 5 or 10 minutes or whatever the right number is. It's different for everybody and it's different for every scenario and each implementation of whatever that system is. But you have to wait for a few minutes for the data to stabilize enough for it to be actually valuable to a reporting or for an event-driven scenario, right? It's not always about like, hey, I'm generating the data so fast and I just want to consume it within that second. Like, there are cases, and we have many customers who say, I'm pulling this data in real time, but I don't want to report on it in real time. I want to hold it in 5 minutes, or I want to hold it for 10 minutes, and then I want to go do something with it after the fact, right? And then you have, to your comment, then you have a whole nother set of data, which is I'm not building a Ferrari. My data doesn't generate that fast, right? I have a bicycle, right? Or I'm walking, right? Or whatever that is,
Sure.
right? Don't punish me because I have a bicycle and you have a Ferrari, right?
Yes.
We're both still valuable and we both still generate what we need to do, right? It's just, you run around
Different.
like a Ferrari, and I prefer to take a bike every day, right? So as I take my bike,
I'll also argue too. The price to buy a Ferrari is much more than a pair of sneakers, or even a nice bike
True.
is much cheaper too. So there's also, I mean, this is one of the things that I kind of like to communicate with customers, and I think Tommy, you do the same thing as well. Is like the more real time you go, the more you're going to need to be comfortable with. Like, look, this is going to increase. You need to have a machine on. A computer needs to be monitoring. The higher the volume, so there's the 3 V's of data: volume, velocity, and variety. We're probably talking about the volume and velocity of data in this realm. The higher those go, the more you're going to need to be capable. The more data you're going to produce on disk, the larger the number of computers you're going to need to run to handle all those events coming in. If you're doing windowing, and I think what you're talking about with like the 5-minute window, or holding on to the events and then making some decisions based on that 5-minute window of time, the windowing, that requires some sort of computer to kind of like store up those events and hang on to them and then aggregate and spit that out. So there is I think a cost implication here as well. And I think a lot of people, my opinion here is, and I'd be curious, Tommy, your opinion on this one as well. People shy away from real-time or event-driven things because they assume IoT, high volume. They think they're always getting a Ferrari. But in reality, well thought out, or thinking about the architecture, you could still do event-driven things, but they don't have to always be at that high price point.
It could be a bicycle, or it could be your video doorbell camera. It could be all these different pieces. I think one of my favorite features, if not my favorite feature in all of real-time intelligence and Fabric, is a feature called continuous ingestion into Event House. And it's unfortunately, I don't want to call it a secret because I don't think it should be a secret. But essentially what we do is we subscribe to a storage account in Azure. So anything in ADLS. And as new data gets added to that, we have just subscribed to the storage account. So the data is automatically picked up, loaded into the Event House. No pipelines, but there's nothing I need to do, right? I just configure and I just say, hey, I'm subscribing to this storage account. And as new stuff shows up in that storage account, just automatically load it. A demo I have that I show for customers and at conferences and things is I build a continuous ingestion pipeline, and then I take an update policy on top. And then I have a Power BI report that sits on top of that in a semantic model. And then before I go into the demo, I talk a little bit about, okay, so, imagine you're a vendor, or, so-and-so drops you a file and it's a JSON file or a CSV file or a pipe separated file or tab or whatever, right? Anything that you want, like you let your dreams run wild, right? Whatever file you kind of get, right?
Yeah.
And then imagine all the steps that you go through to process and transform that data. So before you make it ready and available in a Power BI report, right? It could be going to storage, and then it's going to another storage account, and then you're applying something else, and you're moving it downstream and in all these different places. And then I switch over to Event House and I show continuous ingestion, where we are just loading that data into Event House, and we've created this subscription. And so what the Event House will do within RTI is, as soon as new data gets loaded, it just picks the data up, loads it, adds it into the Event House. And so if I have a Power BI report on top of it, instead of it going through that traditional process, that report can be updated within a few seconds of that file actually getting added to the storage account. So it's much quicker, but you also have a very powerful engine on top of it because of what the Event House engine is. We recently created a new endpoint on top of Lakehouse called Event House Endpoint for Lakehouse. And if you're not familiar with it, but essentially kind of for the same thing, right? Of, hey, we want to be able to make it so your data isn't always a Ferrari. It doesn't always have to be that Ferrari. It can be these different things. But the key premise is that as my data becomes available, I immediately want to go take whatever action that is, right? I want whatever downstream system to go kick off. I don't want to have to worry about, creating artificial delays in my data by scheduling things. I just want to move it get all the way through. So it's an interesting paradigm shift, but as you said, there's a lot more to it than just Ferraris. Right? There's lots of different price points. Go ahead, Tommy.
Let's dive in then to the semantic model side of this too, and I'm really wanting to get your feedback on. This is where I think you're going to get a lot of the Power BI only people to be a little more willing to try this out, because I think there's a lot of conversations that I've seen is like, well, if you use real time, then there goes your semantic models, which is a misconception, because no matter what, a semantic model used to be always, in a sense, more or less cold, because it was, imported data coming in. The real time they're completely different data for different purposes. But we know that we can build a semantic model off of those dynamic data feeds. So how does the semantic model come into play with real time, with the event-driven architecture?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think that a great place to start is in a conversation I have quite regularly. Customers who have been trying to implement Power BI models by essentially pushing data. So we used to have a feature called streaming data sets in Power BI.
Yes.
If you guys were familiar with it. And we recently announced that it was deprecated.
Which, by the way, I'm extremely disappointed by this feature, and I'm gonna complain here for those who are at Microsoft listening. I have a number of webhooks that I'm trying to consume across various platforms and internet things. There's nowhere to put them. Like, you can't. I'm trying to put a webhook into Fabric where the webhook just sends data and Fabric can consume it. I liked the streaming data sets in Power BI because it was like a webhook. I could just have a URL, define a schema, and just send data to it. Now I don't have anything, and there's everything that you want to send data into for Fabric requires like authorization, and sometimes webhooks don't give you that. So that's, Chris, I understand your point there. I want to just complain here for just a hot second. It's missing.
It's a great point. It's killing me too, Mike.
We need a webhook that, like, okay, Microsoft Teams, I don't know who's listening to this, Satya, can you please work with the Microsoft team and give us at least somewhere where we can consume an open endpoint, I don't know, user data function somewhere that is unauthenticated, and I can just send data to it. It needs to be a URL that I can push a JSON body to, that I can go get into Fabric. It's missing, and right now I have to go build. Right now I'm having to go back to Azure to build it, which is not wrong. It's just I don't want to do that. I'm lazy.
It's annoying. I totally hear you.
Okay, sorry.
You might see
unpause.
You might see the huge smile on my face because I'm listening, and I know it's a conversation that we've had many times.
Awesome. All right, you're saying deprecated feature streaming to Power BI data sets is now gone. Now,
right, to streaming to data sets, and when you think about why, like, there was a lot of overhead that happened within a semantic model when you were trying to create a streaming data set into those different pieces. It's far more efficient to keep those engines in either direct query or whatever. But when we create direct query, there's a lot of trade-offs and considerations for that. It seems like far too often it's either, I can have direct query or I can have import, but I couldn't have both, right? It was I either got one or the other. And when you went to a direct query model, it was you put all the pressure back on the source database. And if the source database isn't really prepared for that, then you wind up into all kinds of performance challenges and kind of led down a less than ideal path. But now, because we have all these different features available to us in Fabric, and we can stream this data into the right spot within our TI, it's really easy for us to start to blend those things together. So we can say, hey, I've got my streaming data as it's coming in here, and I'm loading this into my event house. I have a semantic model that's sitting on top that's maybe pulling and being able to query that stream in real time that I'm just joining on top of. But I'm also maybe sourcing the import portion of my semantic model from somewhere else. Maybe it's coming from Direct Lake, or maybe it's coming from somewhere else, where I can really start to bring and bridge these experiences together. You can also try, if depending on what your data set is and depending on what you're doing, just load the data into Event House and just spin direct query on top of it. Kusto is a much different engine. The only challenge with Kusto and the caution is be careful of your joins. Right. So when we think of a traditional relational system, we have a tendency to create a lot of different joins, right? We want to have our star schema with our fact and our dimensions all around it and surrounding all these different pieces. When we're direct querying an engine like a stream or like hot data, we might not want to go through all that modeling exercise, especially if we're going to go into a direct query against Event House or whatever that might look like. We might just want one larger table where we can kind of avoid joins or do those different pieces. And so there's trade-offs and there's different things. The short answer is you can absolutely use semantic models on top of your streaming data. How you want to implement it is very much up to you and is up to your scenario and what you're looking to go do. Do I want all my data just hot and I don't want to have to worry about it and I just want to run a Power BI semantic model in direct query? Do I want to keep maybe 3 days of data hot and then put everything off into a lakehouse or something in a cold path store where I can blend those different things together? The semantic model is really your glue. It's your bridge that allows you to bring all these different things together under this umbrella, right? So when, and I think going to what you were talking about, Tommy, last week with your session around data agents, when you take a data agent and you put a data agent on top of a stream of data that might be coming from Event House, and then you might point it to a semantic model, or you might point it to a lakehouse, or you might be pulling that data from somewhere else. Trying to get the agent to bridge those different things across all those different systems is challenging, right? There's not a whole lot of great ways today to say, customer record here equals customer record over there, and all these different pieces. You have to be extremely explicit in the instructions to the agent to tell it to go do that. But if you can use that semantic model as your bridge, as your glue, then you can bring that semantic layer together, apply that contextualization on top there, and then point your data agent to that. So you still have that entry point. You can still unlock all those fabric goodies, if you will, right? And then create your semantic model that's really tying all these different artifacts and all these different pieces together.
So what are some of the considerations though? Because obviously there's a lot more to, kind of plan for you. Like you said, how much you want to be hot, how much you want to be cold. What are some of the trade-offs and what are and again, life of consultant, the two favorite words are, it depends, but on the average, on the baseline, what would be considered like, okay, I'm going to start with the semantic model with real time. But I have no idea what to do. So how much data should I do? I don't want to worry about cost. I obviously want to make sure it works, but what are some of the baselines for you to kind of check and that generally work for most circumstances?
So I'm going to preface that by saying I've been in consulting for a very long time, Tommy. So for me to give any answer other than it depends, it's going to be really, really challenging for me personally.
Take a swing. Take a swing.
But I think the consideration and the trade-off, and then you're also going to get different answers, right? I think based on kind of who you talk to. I'll tell you, if you look at Event House, and depending on what your data volume is, if you just want to bring your data into Event House and just cache some of it and keep the rest of it retained, then maybe all you need is direct query, right? And just direct query on top of that Event House, and it's going to serve your need for what you're looking for. If you are doing a lot of transformations where you want to bring that data into maybe a cold path store and then join it with your reference data and your dimension data and all the other pieces and go through all your dimensional modeling exercises for what you're going for, then it makes more sense to go point that to Lakehouse, right? Or kind of bridge those two things together, right? Say, I'm going to keep this data hot for only as long as I need it, because this is really what I need to go be able to answer my requirements. And then I want to create my model and my proper data model kind of here downstream based on whatever it is that I'm looking at. Kind of going back to what we were talking about before, I think it all comes down to where do you really want that modeling to occur, right? Remember, with an event-driven architecture, we're concerned with consuming the data in motion, right? That's our goal. And so I think the short answer, without trying to get too it depends-y, is as long as you need it for your specific scenario, right? If you need that for if you need that data hot for 12 hours, then that's fine. If you need that data hot for a week, then that's okay too, right? It's all about those individual pieces. I think some of this talks down to like it's all about the requirements of the business, right? What is it that's important for those particular pieces, and what is it that you're looking for?
I think I want to go after some I think there's when I look at beginner users about talking about event driven or pushing users towards this world of real time experiences. I think what I want people to clearly understand is, at least as beginners, when I look at it, and again, Chris, Tommy, fill me in here, what you feel like is also a beginner user challenge. I think it's just being able to get your head around what is the producer of data and identifying in your design use case, what are we talking about, right? Are we talking about consuming things from blob storage? Are we talking about a device that's sending information? Are we talking about what is the thing that is producing the data? And then on the other side, I use this analogy of the catcher's mitt. Tommy's going to like the baseball analogy here, right? So whenever data is being produced, something has to catch it. Something has to go grab wherever the data is coming from whatever system, whatever that may be. And then once it's caught, once the data is been able to be identified, then you have to identify, okay, does all the data coming from that system, and this is where I guess maybe the concept of a channel or a topic comes into place. So you need to define what's producing it, what's catching it, and in that stream of information or stream of data, what is the topic or channel that you're using to do the things. And I think, Chris, what you're describing to me right now, I'm having an aha moment here, which is when I think about data and data modeling, I'm thinking dimensions, facts, star schema, things, all the data that's basically applied into the model. And what you're saying in real time here is a bit of a shift in this is, as the data comes in, you may need to append those dimensional properties to that data as it comes in as part of the event stream itself. And so instead of thinking about a star model, yes, you still need those things defined, but you're going to go look up or grab or enrich that data as needed. That way, as the data is coming in, you can then have the final result, table, output, data, whatever you need on the other side of this, that it can be actionable right away. Is that a good mental model here?
That's a great way to put it, Mike. I'm really glad you said it that way, because it's one of the things I talk about all the time. Right?
Okay.
So when we think of we think of data, it runs at all these different speeds, right? We're talking about Ferraris and bicycles earlier, right? So
yeah,
if your event data is your Ferrari and it's coming in at some speed, right? And maybe it's coming from, to your point, maybe it's coming from an event hub, or maybe it's coming from Kafka, or maybe it's coming from a CSV, or maybe it's coming from JSON, or maybe it's coming from Parquet, or could be anything, sure, right? Or it's coming from some database, right? So you've got all these different places where you're building these events and you're consuming these events. For really a large portion of time, our goal has been, well, how do we process all of our data at the same speed, right? So sure, how do we make the bicycle go as fast as the Ferrari, right? I need to refresh all of my data, right? And I need to make those events available for the business as fast as I can make them available. So Chris, start pedaling your bicycle really, really hard, because you got to keep up with Ferrari. It's gonna be fun.
Oh no.
You better do some training, right? So start pedaling, right? But to your point, when we look at event-driven architectures, it's the opposite. It's about, hey, I have my Ferrari, my data is moving at that speed, or I want to be able to react to that data at that type of speed, right? And maybe it's not being generated that fast. Maybe it's coming from a vendor who's dropping a file in Azure storage every couple of hours, or
or once a day, even that's a common use case. Yeah. Right? Or I have a backend system that's refreshing the SQL database. I need something to say, I'm done refreshing the backend. Now, when that is complete, then do a triggered event to go load something downstream into Fabric now. So even then, it's I don't want to delay. I don't want to wait, or the scheduling of things gets really off, because you don't want to wait 2 hours, because the process may take 15 minutes today, may take 2 hours tomorrow. Sometimes the process varies. And so having event-driven things, it can just tick along without having to wait.
The number of engagements I've been pulled into where before I kind of went down the event-driven path of, it takes me 7 hours to refresh my reports every day, right?
Yeah.
Why? Right.
Because there's waiting.
Then we go, look, the vendor drops the file at 11 p.m. and then, okay, well, it goes to system A at midnight, and then it goes to system B at 1 a.m., and then it goes to system C at 2 a.m. Right?
Yep. Even though it only takes 5 minutes or 10 minutes to process the data.
Right. Yes. Well, we build all these buffers in because, like you said, today it takes 5 minutes, tomorrow it takes 55 minutes, or it could be anywhere in between.
Yes.
That. So in order to get some type of guarantee of I avoid conflicts. I just wind up scheduling with big buffers in the middle.
Correct.
But then we
Inefficient.
lose, right? Then we lose
Time.
value. And
Yeah.
as organizations have become more and more geographically dispersed, this has become a bigger and bigger problem, right? Because
good point.
now we can't always say, oh, well, data is available at 8 a.m. Eastern. It's fine. Like, you're good. It'll be available at 8, right? Because what about all my European colleagues who
Yes.
they start working at 2 a.m., right? I don't want to guarantee that as my SLA, right?
Sure.
Or
Yeah.
all my colleagues in India, or all my colleagues in some other country, right? It could be any country in the world. I got all these countries, and I really need to make this data available to them as these things are occurring, right? So rather than needing to create and build these built-in latencies and these built-in delays for doing all these schedules, I can get to the point where I can say, hey, I'm pulling these events as these events are occurring. Like you said, I'm just triggering the next stage in the process and just saying, hey, I want to keep my data in motion. But to your comment a minute ago, instead of trying to say, I'm going to process all my data and I'm going to try to process it as quick as I possibly can, hey, I'm going to bring this data through and I'm just going to contextualize that stream. I'm going to take the information from whatever I've curated for my reference data or my dimensional data or whatever. I think Fabric's really interesting to me because we've taken all these different worlds and we've really brought them together, and now we have 3 words that all mean the same thing. So it's going to take us some time as an industry to be like, well, is it an event?
Back out again.
Is it an event? Is it a fact, or is it a transaction? I don't know. Well, let's debate. It's the new Kimball versus Inman debate. I can see it happening.
Yes.
But we take all these different pieces and we say, okay, we're going to contextualize the stream of data as these things are occurring, and this is what I want to react on. This is what I want to have happen in real time, or this is what I want to make available to my business as quick as those things are being generated. And then I want to go apply and say, okay, now I'm going to go take kind of all these different things and I'm going to go send it down my cold path. I'm going to go do all these different pieces. But you're really able to kind of, like you said, sort of flip the script a little bit. One thing I tell customers quite regularly is it's always easier to bring cold data hot than it is to try to make your hot data go or make your hot data into cold, right?
Interesting.
So when we look at something like real-time intelligence, being able to shortcut those things in is like from your lake house or from your warehouse or wherever, your mirrored database, wherever that data is coming in or however it's landing into Fabric, right?
Yep.
And then being able to short that into Event House, where then you can go do that contextualization, you can do that reference, you can do those joins, is much easier than trying to say, okay, I've got this stream of data and I'm going to go land it in a data lake, and then I want to just go process it as fast as I can with all my schedules and everything else that I've had to go deal with.
Interesting. This is good. I think we're almost at time here. Tommy, any kind of wrapping thoughts or thoughts around semantic models, the event stream, bringing in key events and enriching the event stream for actionable data?
So at what point does KQL become the new DAX? And in terms of I just want to know from a developer point of view, there's obviously the KQL language. And if I'm still building semantic models, at what point do I need to change careers, or does someone listening where they think that they can actually provide the value where and I think we've talked about this a lot already with our real-time conversations, is real-time is great, but where the best applications of it. If I want to get started today, if I'm listening, I'm running, I'm biking, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to begin to get my feet wet with semantic models and the event-driven architecture. What language do I need to know? What is some of those skills that I need to know? And how do I make sure I don't go off too many rabbit holes in terms of all the other things that you need that go into real time?
So it's a great question, Tommy. I think, first, semantic models are very powerful because they allow us to apply all that semantic meaning across our business, right? So if it's, hey, I've been using DAX for a really long time, I'm really skilled at it, I want to continue to do those, I don't think that's changing. What I think is changing is, instead of saying, I have a toolbox and the only thing in it is my hammer, now I have an entire toolbox that's available to me. And so do I need a hammer all the time, or can I use a screwdriver, or can I use a drill, or like, what are all the different pieces, right? Do I need a sander, right? What are all the different things that I might need that allow me to do those pieces? And KQL is just another tool within that toolbox that allows me to go act on that data. When it comes to dealing with data streaming and data in motion and things that are happening in real time, that's where KQL is really powerful, because it also allows me to do a lot of these different pieces and kind of look at these, kind of make these transformations, whether I'm creating an update policy or whether I'm trying to go create something. But being able to analyze that data very deeply, regardless of my data volume, allows me to become an extremely effective analyst, whether it's security data, whether it's business data, whatever it is. So I think it's start by understanding the use case for the thing that you want to solve, and then how can KQL help you do those different pieces. There's a lot of functionality in the KQL language, a ton of functionality. And so there is what's called the Custo Detective Agency, if you really want to kind of get started and kind of dive into KQL as a language, to understand all those different pieces. The Custo Detective Agency, and I don't know if we can grab a link, we could probably put it in the chat.
Got it.
Place to start. But that's always it's a gamified experience to kind of help you get started and help you understand kind of real-time intelligence and how KQL works. And then on top of that, right, how do you leverage KQL to go accomplish these kind of big data constructs? All these different pieces of, hey, I want to go dive into my data really deeply in all these different pieces. But I never start out with saying like everything we've ever done, we should just drop and go start over. I think it's more of a blend, right? It's just how do we start to bring that in and say, okay, like I know I can go do this. Like something, I know, many customers love to use KQL for is breaking out JSON, for example, because it's extremely easy in KQL. So I can use KQL to break out my JSON. And we have customers, that's what they use it for, right? They take a JSON file that gets loaded into a storage account, drop it into Event House, parse it, and then they go move it into a lakehouse. So it's like a hot path because they're able to go report and act on that data in real time for whatever they need, but they're also able to kind of use it for that scenario for what it is that's working for them. But there's tons of different use cases and tons of scenarios. So rather than starting with everything, I'd say start with whatever it is you want to go solve.
I think when I look at the Custo question that you asked, Tommy, I mean, Custo is a database. It's like a storage system and it's a query system that's kind of independent of everything else that we've been using. I think if we look at like the landscape of like what Power BI is, we have semantic models that write DAX. You have the Spark engine that does its own kind of way of processing data. It uses storage accounts, basically blob storage behind the scenes. And then you have like Custo, which is kind of doing its own thing. It's a storage system and it's a query language on top of it. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, Custo was made for Power BI. It was made for the internal analytics of Microsoft to build like reporting at scale for all the events that are coming from Power BI users across the system. I thought that was kind of like where Custo was kind of invented from. It was actually a reporting system for Power BI to see what was going on there. Is that true, or is that just something I made up in my head?
No, you didn't make it up in your head. I don't know if it came specifically for Power BI alone.
Okay.
But I can tell you that it came from Microsoft as a whole's need to analyze like all of the telemetry and all of the data being generated from all of the services in real time.
Okay.
And when Custo was first created, there was no tool that really allowed us to do that at scale. Okay. And so now, fast forward over 10 years later, every service in Microsoft, Power BI, M365, Dynamics, every Azure service, every service logs their telemetry to Custo. And by logging all that telemetry into Custo, then they're able to go get all these real-time insights for what it is that they're looking for. You can still create these star schemas, you can create some of these different things, but it really changes, and it's really quite powerful with what you can do, because the fundamentals of the engine work much different. It's not a traditional SQL engine. It's always the first thing I tell everyone. It's not a traditional SQL engine. It's much different.
Very purpose-built for that thing.
It was purpose-built for that thing, but it also means it's extremely powerful at what it does.
Awesome. Well, that being said, let's go ahead and quickly wrap it here. Thank you all for listening and hanging out, talking to us about real-time semantic modeling, event-driven pieces. I think maybe my main takeaway here is think about event-driven architectures, not in just a Ferrari all the time, but think about the bicycle use cases of reducing lead time to processing and loading your data. I think that's a big takeaway for me. All right. We appreciate your time here. We know you could be spending your time on many other things. Thank you for jumping in and listening to this podcast and learning more about event-driven architectures. We hope you found something valuable. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your expertise as a previous consultant and now all your time in the Microsoft CAT team, telling us what you're seeing and how you're communicating this to customers. This is invaluable to our audience. We appreciate you.
Yeah,
Tommy,
thanks so
where
much.
else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. And share with a friend since, we do this for free. Do you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Well, head over to powerbi.tips/podcast, leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of Power BI Tips social media channels.
Thanks, Chris, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks.